Oh my God, I can't stop! Whoa, don't be like that guy. There are some descending mistakes to be had on an XC bike, but luckily, here's how to avoid them. Right, there are descending mistakes to be made on an XC bike because it can get pretty leery, and I think the one we're going to kick off with is the one I see happen most often. It's not getting your weight far enough back. This is a common problem on an XC bike. A lot of the times down to the riding position on one, because you're very stretched out and they're sort of designed that your weight's much further lent forwards, getting that weight and shifting it back is pretty tricky, but here's how to fix it. If you're running a dropper post on your XC bike, you definitely want to make sure that thing is slammed. I see a lot of people, again, sadly they maybe just forget to press the button or they just don't realize it's there sometimes, I don't know. But making sure that dropper's down out of the way is going to hugely help get your weight back. Again, just make sure that your body position is in such a way that your butt is behind the saddle. You definitely want to get that ass as far back as you can. That's going to stop you from catapulting forwards over the bars should you start to get a little buck wild. I just came through this section here. I came through it firstly, I actually did ride it blind, but I was like, it's pretty chunky rocks, and I got all out of shape. Oh my God. Oh. Now, if I had my weight far forwards on that, there would definitely have been some OTB action. But I didn't. Luckily, my bum was back, my saddle was down, so it meant, again, with the saddle down, that I could move my butt around and my body around, therefore get me out of a bit of trouble. And look at this, I got through it nice and clean on the second go. Right, next up on my hit list of mistakes is braking control. Now, you might be thinking, well, when it comes to braking, surely it's all hands on deck and slam on the anchors. Well, that's not the case. XC bikes are finicky little things which can sort of get unsettled quite easily. So being correct on the brakes, if you like, using the right brake at the right time in the right circumstance, is actually pretty crucial. And I'm going to show you on this corner here. So we've got a fairly loose bit of ground coming in to a left-hander. It's got a bit of a step in the middle. So you can't really just go pulling the brakes really hard because you're going to wash out on the gravel. At the same time, you can't just do a big skid because your front wheel drops off in a rut below. So actually using the right brake and a bit more front brake action, but carefully, is going to be crucial. Take it away, feeling too good to me. So coming in, I'm going to be riding the main line here. Now the wide line is actually a pretty awkward line. It could work, but it's going to slow me down quite a bit. So I'm going to look to drop on the inside here. Now what's going to happen is my front wheel is going to drop off of here. I'm going to use my brakes, both brakes fairly evenly to have scrubbed the speed beforehand for the turn. And then what actually happens is, instead of having that back brake locked up and trying to skid it around, which isn't really going to work, dropping off this big step and stuff here, you see, once my front wheel comes off, I'm actually going to go a little bit harder on the front brake and shift my body weight forwards ever so slightly, sort of doing a little picking the back end up, if you like, and being able to pivot that round. So it's sort of like a, I don't want to say a nose manual because that sounds obviously pretty tech, but you're actually just able to shift the back wheel around a little easier, and hopefully should look a little something like this. If all that sounded a little bit overwhelming, you thought, well, I'm not quite there yet, Rich. Well, don't worry. The other line, like I said about, is this slightly higher line. So scrubbing speed beforehand, using both brakes fairly evenly, because I'm not going to be going too crazy. I'm then going to carve up outside the main line here onto these rocks, where I'm going to use both brakes again fairly evenly, slightly maybe more on the back actually, because I don't want to be throwing my weight too far forwards. You see where I come over this little bump here? If I'm really heavy on the front brake, then that's going to shift my body weight forwards. So fairly nice and evenly, smooth on the brakes, leaning into the turn and then easily coming out of it. Next up on my list of common mistakes made is line choice. Now, riding downhill is wild at the best of times. However, choosing bad lines on an XC bike, something with little travel, is surely going to end in disaster. And I briefly touched upon this earlier actually, where I went in blind to a section previously and went all over the show, but I've got a better section for you now, which is just going to show, you know what I said, exactly how a good line choice and a bad line choice can possibly make a difference to speed, but also getting through a section safely. This section here is exactly what we're going to talk about. This is a great section where we can compare two very different lines. So, I don't know if you can see where my bike is right at the very top there. essentially, we'll call it pro line choice, A line if you like, hammering straight down through the middle. It's pretty rough and wild, but it's going to be the quickest, fastest line. Say if you're in a race situation, something along those lines. Now, if you want to play it safe, or maybe you're a bit more of a timid rider, that's entirely fair enough. The other line would be coming in, staying fairly high riders left and actually zigzagging down. So you're making an S-bend through this section rather than a straight line. Now there's two different sort of schools of thought to this. If you're straight lining it, it's faster. However, there's more risk involved, higher consequence if you like. If you're going B-line, you're snaking it, you're elongating the section. Well, you're doing exactly the opposite. You're making a longer time, you're doing more of a distance, and it's going to be slower. There is no right or wrong as such. There's whatever feels comfortable with you, but it's knowing which one to do, which one's within your skill set, I think is kind of like the crucial part. So when you are hitting those wilder lines, again, make sure your butt's back, make sure you're nice and smooth on the brakes, especially if it's something steeper like this when we are descending. You're not too grabby on that front brake, but let's ride those lines and I'll show you what each one looks like. Okay, so coming in, I'm nice and smooth. Look, this is the B line. I'm gonna wiggle. You can see I'm avoiding the rougher stuff. Coming in nice and controlled and safely through. Look at that. Right, on this straight line, I want to keep a bit more speed to not sink in the holes. Looking up, boom, straight through. Look, don't be a Simon Stiffback when it comes to riding downhill on your XC bike. It's all too easy to tense up and become a bit of a passenger when things do get a little bit rough. And that's the opposite of what you want to do. Now, I know sometimes it's easier said than done, but trying to stay nice and loose and relaxed on the bike is going to be your biggest friend. When you ride really stiff on the bike and you're all tensed up, you're going to lose a bit of that bike control and the ability to move your body around the bike. And this is going to cause some major problems in other areas when it comes to riding down. Things like sudden direction changes when you're moving different lines, or hopping over or manualing through stuff is going to become much harder when you're sort of death gripping on for dear life. So staying loosey-goosey is the way to do it. Just try and, if necessary, back off the speed a bit so you can become a little bit more relaxed. Remember, keep those eyes up and looking forwards to where you want to be going. You should be at least looking 2 to 3 bike lengths down the trail, but as the speed quickens, you might want to look further. And what that's going to be able to allow you to do is the opposite again of what I just said. So you're going to be able to make sort of sudden line choice changes. You're going to be able to see obstacles coming that you might want to hop over or manual through. I mean, heck, you might be following someone and they might suddenly go over the bars. Neil. And you don't want to crash into them, no way. So just trying to stay nice and loose on the bike and not all stiff and rigid is definitely something I would recommend. But look, hey, we're done here in Arizona. Look, this has been a great fun video to make for you guys and girls out there. If you've enjoyed it, why not give it a little thumbs up? Don't forget, show that channel some love. Click the subscribe button, it goes a long way to helping us out. And let me know what you thought in the comments down below. Have you got any more tips or tricks for descending that maybe I've missed? But look, until next time, I'll catch you later.